Abraham Lincoln killed 38 men. Same week he freed the slaves. Same pen. Same hand. One signature made him a hero. The other one you were never taught. December 26, 1862, the day after Christmas. In Washington, President Abraham Lincoln is preparing a document that will free millions of enslaved people, the Emancipation Proclamation. In days, he'll be hailed as the Great Liberator. But 1,500 miles away in the frozen town of Mankato, Minnesota, a very different scene is unfolding. 4,000 spectators are gathering in the snow. They haven't come for a holiday parade. They've come to watch an execution. Before them stands a massive wooden scaffold specially designed by military engineers for one purpose: to drop 38 men in the exact same second. This is the story of the largest mass execution in American history. It wasn't ordered by a dictator, it was signed by Abraham Lincoln. And to understand how we got to this dark moment, we have to go back to a single sentence about eating grass. The year is 1862. The Civil War is draining the United States of money and men. But on the Minnesota frontier, the Dakota people are fighting a different enemy: starvation. The U.S. government had forced the Dakota onto a narrow strip of land. In exchange, they were promised yearly payments of gold and food. But in the summer of 1862, the gold didn't come. Congress was too busy with the war in the South. The Dakota were desperate. Their crops had failed. Their children were eating boiled tree bark to survive. They went to the local white traders to ask for food on credit. The traders refused. One trader, a man named Andrew Myrick, looked at the starving leaders and delivered an insult that would ignite a war. He said, "So far as I am concerned, if they are hungry, let them eat grass." Those words were a death sentence. History turns on small moments. You might think a war starts with a grand speech. This one started with chicken eggs. On August 17th, 4 young Dakota hunters were walking past a settler's farm. One of them took some eggs from a nest. When the settler caught them, an argument broke out. To prove his bravery, one of the young men shot the settler. Then they shot 4 more. Panic spread. The Dakota leaders knew that Washington would demand retribution. Their chief was a man named Little Crow. Little Crow had visited Washington. He had shaken hands with the president. He knew the power of the white man. He told his warriors, "The white men are like locusts when they fly so thick that the whole sky is a snowstorm. We cannot kill them all." But the young warriors were angry. They were hungry. And they wanted war. Reluctantly, Little Crow agreed to lead them. The first target they found was Andrew Myrick, that same trader. When they found his body days later, he was lying in the dirt, and his mouth was stuffed full of green grass. The war lasted only 6 weeks, but it was brutal. Hundreds of settlers were killed. Panic swept across the northern states. The Union Army, embarrassed by its losses in the Civil War, needed a victory. They sent General John Pope to Minnesota. Pope was not interested in peace. He was interested in revenge. He sent a telegram to his officers with a chilling order: "It is my purpose to utterly exterminate the Sioux. They are to be treated as maniacs or wild beasts." Notice the word, exterminate. By late September, the Dakota surrendered. They were starving and outnumbered. General Pope didn't treat them as prisoners of war. He treated them as criminals. And he set up a military commission that would make a mockery of the American justice system. Imagine a trial where the judges are the soldiers who were fighting you yesterday. Imagine you have no lawyer. Imagine you don't speak the language of the court. This was the military tribunal of 1862. The trials began on September 28th. In the first day alone, they tried 16 men. By November, they were trying 40 cases a day. That is one trial every 10 minutes. Some trials lasted less than 5 minutes. The evidence? Often just a witness saying, "I saw him there." If a Dakota man admitted to firing a gun, even in self-defense during a battle, he was sentenced to death. In the end, the commission produced a list: 303 men, all sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. General Pope sent the list to the White House. He expected a quick signature. He didn't expect a bishop. Bishop Henry Whipple was a rare man in Minnesota. He saw the Dakota as human beings. While the mob was sharpening their axes, Whipple traveled to Washington to plead for mercy. Abraham Lincoln listened. The president was under immense pressure. His advisors told him, "Mr. President, if you pardon these Indians, the people of Minnesota will vote against you. They might even leave the Union." Lincoln had to choose political safety or his conscience. While the country focused on the Civil War, Lincoln spent his nights alone in his office, reviewing the handwritten trial records of 303 men. He looked for a distinction. He decided he would only execute those who had participated in massacres of civilians. Those who had simply fought in battle would be spared. He worked for weeks. Finally, he took his pen and wrote out a new list. He crossed out 265 names. He left 38. He later told the Senate, "I could not afford to hang men for votes." December 26th, 10 a.m. The frost is bitter cold in Mankato. 38 Dakota men are led onto the giant scaffold. They do not beg for their lives. As the hoods are placed over their heads, one man starts a song, then another. Soon, all 38 are chanting their death song. Their voices echo off the frozen river. They grasp each other's hands. The signal is given. A soldier cuts a single rope. The platform drops. In 1 second, silence falls over Minnesota. It was, and remains, the largest mass execution in U.S. history. But the horror didn't end with the hanging. What happened next is the most shocking part of this story. The bodies were buried in a shallow trench near the river, but they didn't rest in peace. Under the cover of darkness, local doctors arrived with shovels. They dug up the bodies. They wanted fresh cadavers for medical study. One of those doctors was a man named William Mayo. He took the body of a Dakota leader named Cut Nose. He brought the corpse to his office. He dissected it in front of his colleagues. He cleaned the skeleton and kept it in an iron kettle in his home for years. His children played with those bones. This Dr. Mayo would go on to found the world-famous Mayo Clinic. For decades, the bones of the executed men were used as teaching tools. Their families never knew. Cut Nose's skull remained at the Mayo Clinic for over a century. First on display, then simply lost. Only in the late 1990s did the Mayo Clinic return the skull to his family. In 2018, 156 years later, the clinic officially apologized to the Dakota people. And what of Little Crow, the leader who didn't want war? He was shot by a settler months later while picking raspberries. July 3rd, 1863. Farmer Nathan Lamson and his son Chauncey stumbled upon Little Crow and his son Wawanapa. They didn't know who it was. A firefight broke out. Little Crow was mortally wounded by a shot to the gut. He told his son to run, and died. When they discovered it was Little Crow, Lamson received a reward of $500, a massive sum at the time. Today, that's about $12,500. His scalp, his hair, was peeled off for that $500 bounty. But that wasn't all. Little Crow's body was brought back to Hutchinson, where a mob desecrated it again. The body was dragged down Main Street. Firecrackers were shoved into his ears. Dogs tore at his head. After the celebration, the body was thrown into an alley where garbage was regularly dumped. His skull was put on display in a museum in St. Paul for 50 years. Only in 1971 were his remains returned to his grandson, Jesse Wakeman, for burial. But the story doesn't end with the hanging. After the execution, more than 1,600 Dakota, including women, children, and elders, were exiled from Minnesota. On their journey into exile, they were attacked by a mob of white settlers. One infant was ripped from his mother's arms and beaten to death. They were sent to the Crow Creek Reservation in Dakota, a place ravaged by drought. More than 200 Dakota died in the first 6 months, many of them children. The U.S. Congress annulled all treaties with the Dakota, declared their lands property of the state, and exiled an entire nation from their homeland. Lincoln freed the slaves. He saved the Union. He became the great liberator. But in the winter of 1862, his signature also ended 38 lives and exiled an entire nation from their home. It is a headline that history tried to forget, but the scars remain. This is Forgotten Headlines. Subscribe for more stories from the archives.